The mountains were my religion. That is what I always said, and I meant every word of it. Growing up in Switzerland, with the Alps stretching in every direction as far as you could see, the snow was the only thing I ever truly believed in. From the time I was 5 years old, I was on skis. By 12, I was competing at regional level. By 20, I was wearing the Swiss national colours, racing down slopes at speeds that made my vision blur and my heart forget everything. Every fear, every doubt, every question I had never thought to ask myself. I was fast. I was strong. I was Swiss. And for a long time, I thought that was more than enough. My life was built on discipline. Wake before the sun, train until your body screams, and then train past that point. Because champions are made past the point where ordinary people stop. Ice baths at 5 in the morning, protein, recovery, repeat. My coaches told me I had something rare, not just speed, but a quality of fearlessness that could not be taught. I would launch off a mountain at full force and feel nothing but freedom. Pure, white, blinding freedom. The kind that makes crowds go silent before they erupt. But I want to tell you something I never admitted publicly during all those years of racing. That freedom lasted exactly as long as the race. 30 seconds, sometimes 40. And then I was standing at the bottom of the mountain, breathing hard, and the world came rushing back. The noise, the expectations, the relentless pressure to be faster, better, more. I chased that feeling my entire career. I thought if I could find the right slope, the right conditions, the right performance, I could hold on to it forever. I never could. I met him in Egypt. I was there for a short vacation, a rare gift I had given myself after a long and exhausting season. His name was Ahmed. He was not like any man I had known before. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't perform. There was a quietness around him that confused me at first, because in my world, quietness meant weakness. Champions were loud, champions were visible. Ahmed was neither of those things. And yet there was something in the way he carried himself, a steadiness, a calm, that made you feel, without understanding why, that he knew something you didn't. Within 2 years, he became my husband. And I need to be clear about something. He never once asked me to change. He never placed conditions on me. He never sat me down and told me what I needed to believe. He simply lived his faith, quietly and consistently, and he let me watch. The first time I saw him pray, I didn't fully understand what I was seeing. He had stepped away from the dinner table one evening, and I watched from the hallway as he unrolled a small prayer mat and stood on it with his hands at his sides. He raised his hands to his ears, whispered something I couldn't hear, and then something changed in his face. Every tension left it. Every muscle softened. He bowed slowly from the waist, then rose again, then lowered himself all the way to the ground until his forehead rested on the mat, his hands open on either side of his head. I stood there and I could not look away. When he finished, he turned his head slowly to each side, said something quietly, and then returned to the table as if he had simply stepped outside for fresh air. I asked him what he had been doing. He smiled at me and said, "Talking to God." Something about the simplicity of that answer went straight through me. I had been raised in a Christian household the way most people in my country are. Christmas and Easter, church on the days that mattered, a vague and general belief in something above us, but no real conversation with it. God was abstract. God was formal. God was someone you addressed in a building on scheduled days, through scripted words someone else had written for you. Prayer was a ceremony. Prayer was something you completed, not something you experienced. What I had just watched was none of those things. What I had seen was a man talking to God the way I spoke to my coach, directly, personally, in the middle of a Tuesday evening, on a small mat in a rented apartment, without ceremony or audience or anyone watching to be impressed. I began to ask questions.
Ahmed answered everyone with a patience I had no framework for. He recommended books, not to convert me, but simply to inform me. He answered my questions at midnight when my mind wouldn't rest. He never made me feel judged for what I didn't know, or for the doubts I was afraid to say out loud. And the questions I had been carrying my whole life without realising it. Who am I when the race is over? What is the purpose behind all of this striving, this relentless need to perform? What happens after the medals stop, after the body slows, after the world moves on to the next champion? Islam answered them, not with fairy tales, with clarity, with history, with a logic and a precision that stunned me. But even then, I was not ready. And then, and this is the part that always surprises people, it was the water that changed everything. One morning I woke before him. I walked to the kitchen for coffee and found Ahmed standing at the sink, going through a sequence I had noticed before, but never truly observed. He was washing, slowly, deliberately, with complete attention. His hands, 3 times, his mouth, his nose, his face, lifted toward the stream of water with his eyes gently closed, his arms to the elbow, wet hands drawn carefully over his head, his ears, and then his feet, one after the other, with the same quiet intention he had given to everything else. I stood in the doorway and I could not move, not because it was strange, but because it was the most intentional thing I had ever watched a human being do at 6 a.m. This was Wudu, the Islamic act of purification before prayer. And when I finally understood what it was and why it existed, something cracked open inside me that I had not known was sealed. Here was a man who, 5 times every single day, before standing before his Creator, stopped everything to make himself clean. Not merely his hands, his presence, his intention. He was saying with his body what I had longed my whole life to say, but had never found a ritual for. I am here. I am paying attention. I want to come before you with everything I am. I had spent my entire career preparing my body. Thousands of hours of training to be ready for 30 seconds on a slope. I stretched every muscle, strengthened every joint, conditioned every reflex, all for performance, all for the crowd, all for the finish line. And I had never once prepared myself to stand before something greater than any mountain. I began performing Wudu myself that same week. Not because I had converted, not because anyone had asked it of me, but because I needed to know what it felt like. I stood at the sink and followed the steps Ahmed had quietly shown me. And when I lifted my face from the water for the last time, when I felt the coolness settle across my skin, I stood completely still for a long moment. And I wept. I did not fully understand why. I only knew that something old had loosened in my chest. Something honest had surfaced that I had not known was buried inside me for 30 years. I began to pray. I learned the movements before I learned the Arabic words. Standing, bowing, the full prostration, pressing my forehead to the ground. That first prostration changed me in a way I cannot adequately describe in any language. There is something that happens when the highest point of your body touches the earth in surrender before God. Something leaves you, a pride you didn't know you were carrying, an armour you didn't realise was weighing you down every single day. I rose from that position feeling lighter than I had felt after any medal, any podium, any finish line in my entire career. I learned Al-Fatiha syllable by syllable. Ahmed would recite it softly and I would follow. My Arabic imperfect, my intention complete. 7 lines. Everything I had ever needed, held inside 7 lines. And every time I finished them and continued into the rest of the prayer, I felt something in my chest I had never once felt in all my years of competition. Not victory. Something quieter than victory. something that did not disappear the moment the applause stopped. Peace. Real peace. The kind that does not depend on performance. I took my Shahada on a Tuesday morning in Cairo. There were no crowds, no cameras, no ceremony. It was Ahmed, an imam, and me, in a small room with soft morning light coming through the window. And I said the words. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. I had stood on podiums with gold medals against my chest and thousands of people chanting my name. And none of it came close to that Tuesday morning in that small room. Because for the first time in my life, I had not crossed a finish line. I had arrived at a beginning. People ask me now if I miss my old life, if I miss the racing, the speed, the identity of being a Swiss athlete on the national stage. And I tell them honestly, I will always love the mountains. The snow will always be part of who I am. But I have found something on the prayer mat that I never once found on any slope in my life. I found stillness. I found a purpose that does not expire with performance. I found a God who is never distant, never abstract, never reserved for special occasions or ceremonies that someone else designed. Every morning before the sun rises, I wake up. I go to the sink. I wash my hands, my face, my arms, my feet. And I stand before my Lord, clean, present, and grateful. Grateful for the husband who showed me by living, not by preaching. Grateful for the water that woke something in me I had been sleeping through my entire life. Grateful for the mat beneath my feet, for the words on my lips, for the 7 lines that hold the entire universe inside them. The mountain used to be my religion. Now I know what religion truly is. And it is not something you race toward. It is not a finish line, not a podium, not something you earn through performance or speed or fearlessness. It is something you return to, 5 times a day, every day, for the rest of your life.